Welcome to the World Over Live. We're coming to you from this ballroom at the Denver Sheraton. This was the site of the 129th Supreme Convention of the Knights of Columbus. So don't change your dial because you don't see the familiar backdrop here. Tonight we're going to bring you highlights of the convention, plus some exclusive interviews we did in between the day's televised events. To start things off, here's Supreme Knight Carl Anderson, a bit of his annual address. This is sort of his State of the Union address, both for the Knights of Columbus as well as the church at large. Take a look.
My brother Knights, Pope Benedict XVI recently reminded us that hope is a key word in biblical faith, so much so that at times the words faith and hope seem interchangeable. As Catholics, we are a people of hope, and as Pope Benedict put it, the one who has hope lives differently. The theme of our convention this year is so that the world may know new hope. We bring new hope to the world through the millions of acts of charity we do each year. We bring new hope to the world when we live out our principles of charity, unity, fraternity, and patriotism in ways that change lives for the better. Our theme is taken from a prayer by Pope John Paul II. The prayer concluded his document, Ecclesia in America, following the Synod of Bishops for America in 1997. John Paul II asked the bishops of the Western Hemisphere to reflect on America as a single entity, and his decision to speak of America in the singular was his way of expressing the unity which the Church must foster as part of her mission. As Knights of Columbus, we know the importance of unity in our lives as Catholics. It is the second principle of our order. It has real meaning for us at many levels, in our councils, within the nations in which we are active, and as an international fraternity of Catholic men spanning 3 continents. It is this same unity which guides us to solidarity with our bishops and with our priests. And a significant part of our mission is to make manifest the deeper spiritual union and spirit of solidarity that John Paul II sought to develop among all the Catholics of our hemisphere. In April, I had the opportunity to deliver my own views regarding President Kennedy's inaugural address at historic Faneuil Hall in Boston, only a mile or two from Bunker Hill Council 62, where President Kennedy was a member. On that occasion, I stressed that President Kennedy's view about our rights coming from the hand of God helps explain why Congress 6 years earlier added the words "under God" to the Pledge of Allegiance. Those words were not the slightest bit controversial at that time. Everyone knew and understood that in the context of the Pledge of Allegiance, those words were making the point that President Kennedy was making. Our fundamental rights are not the state's to give or take away. We are endowed by our Creator with those rights, and it is government's responsibility to protect them. I'm happy to say that 2 United States Courts of Appeals have seen things exactly the same way. Since 2005, we have been directly involved in 2 lawsuits to defend the constitutionality of the words "under God." Thanks to the Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty, which has represented us in these cases, both the Ninth Circuit in California and the First Circuit in Boston agreed with us that the pledge with the words "under God" is constitutional. And in June, by refusing to hear an appeal, the United States Supreme Court effectively upheld the Pledge of Allegiance. My brother Knights, My brother knights, not only were we successful in persuading Congress to place the words "under God" into the pledge, we have also been successful in keeping those words there. The principle that our nation is a nation under God is foundational to our system of government. It is a principle expressed eloquently in the Declaration of Independence, in Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, and in Kennedy's inaugural address. And now it is a principle that will continue to live in the voices of our children from coast to coast, thanks to the Knights of Columbus. The only one. Today, the very nature of the family is being threatened in many places and in many ways. And during the past 4 decades, even our most fundamental right, the right to life, has been undermined. I don't have to tell you that in many ways, society has lost track of the things that are most important: the sacredness of human life and the right of every child, not only to be born, but to be raised by a mother and a father. As faithful Catholics and Knights of Columbus, we know that among our most important tasks is to shape our culture according to gospel values. In this effort, we continue to work closely with our bishops. In May, the Minnesota legislature voted to put a marriage protection amendment on the ballot in 2012. But unfortunately, in New York, it was a different story. The narrow vote to enact same-sex marriage in the New York Senate came despite our determined efforts and that of Archbishop Timothy Dolan and the other bishops in New York. One of our proudest moments in the history of the Knights of Columbus was co-sponsoring with the Diocese of Brooklyn the Mass celebrated by Pope John Paul II during his visit to the United States in 1995. During his homily that day, John Paul II said this: "There can be no life worthy of the human person without a culture and a legal system that honors and defends marriage and the family. Children," he said, "Children," he said, "need not only material support from their parents, but more importantly, a secure, affectionate, and morally correct family environment." The New York State Senate may have forgotten his message, but the Knights of Columbus never will. As this national debate continues, we must be well informed and capable of discussing the issue with our fellow citizens. We are proud to be working with the U.S. Bishops' Subcommittee on Marriage. Recently, they released a new video on this subject entitled "Made for Life." And as Subcommittee Chairman Bishop Salvatore Cordileone puts it, in contemporary debates about the meaning of marriage, the rights and dignity of the child should be at the forefront. Marriage, he points out, is about the vital importance of a mother and a father together for life and for the upbringing of their children. Most of all, he says, there is a close connection between a culture of life and a culture that protects and promotes marriage. The two cannot be separated.
And here is my exclusive interview with Supreme Knight Carl Anderson. Worthy Supreme Knight, big news today. The Knights of Columbus are going to acquire the John Paul II Cultural Center, which has been our home for the last few years of the world over. Why this decision and why buy that center?
Well, I think it's a result of a dream, for many, many years. But now, with the beatification of Pope John Paul II, Blessed John Paul, we thought, how do we keep the legacy alive, his mission, his vision? How do we expand his teaching, his theological approach, and devotion to him? So now it's not only a great pope, but we have a great saint.
Right.
And so, he came to the United States 7 times, Mexico 5, Canada 3. So to keep this alive in North America, we thought was a great project for us.
Now, the chapel at the John Paul II Cultural Center is rather diminutive. Do you all have plans to expand it? When Archbishop Worrell talks about a shrine, an archdiocesan shrine, that makes one think in bigger terms of something a little more massive.
Well, I think so. I think what we're going to do is have a very comprehensive exhibit on the life and pontificate of John Paul II, and we are going to renovate, if I could say, the chapel.
Sure.
We've asked a very wonderful artist, a Jesuit priest, Father Marco Rupnik, who has done mosaics at Lourdes. He's done the mosaics for the shrine of Padre Pio in Italy. He did the chapel for John Paul II, and he's doing the chapel at the center in Krakow, the John Paul II
Cultural Center in Krakow, that
Poland.
I know Archbishop Stanislaw, Cardinal Stanislaw Dziwisz was a part of.
And so he's going to do the chapel for the shrine in Washington.
Wow! So this is going to be quite a.
It's going to be great, I think.
Quite a center of pilgrimage, and it so ties into the National Shrine and having the Franciscan monastery. It's all right there in
I
DC.
think it's going to be a very cooperative effort.
Yeah, excellent. Let's talk about. You mentioned the under God in the Pledge of Allegiance. This is something that many of our viewers may not even know. I know many of my secular friends didn't. That the Knights of Columbus were instrumental in inserting under God in the pledge. Tell us how that came about and the great efforts you all have undertaken to protect that clause in the pledge.
Well, like so many of our projects, national, international projects, begins as a local council. And so in the 1950s, we began to be more engaged in this, and one of the major organizations in the country to promote it. Finally, it was put into the pledge in the 1950s. But the idea is very simple, because at the time, of course, there was the Cold War, the fighting against communism, the whole 20th century of Nazism, communism, that the state is the most powerful and absolute, and nobody can have any life outside of the state or allegiance outside of the state. So under God made it clear that just as we believed in the Declaration of Independence, our rights come from our Creator, not from the state. So when we urge under God in the Pledge of Allegiance, what we're really saying as Knights of Columbus, I think, is that we will always render to Caesar what is Caesar's, but we will never render to Caesar what is God's.
And we heard that in your talk today about the defense of marriage. You're reinstating the Knights' commitment to life. And in your book that you came out with that I think didn't get the attention it deserved, quite frankly, Beyond a House Divided. And this was based on statistics and polling that the Knights undertook. And tell us some of the findings, because I think people would be shocked. They believe things are so polarized, particularly on the life issue. That's not necessarily what you found.
No, what we found in one of the ideas of the book is let's go beyond slogans, let's go beyond labels, let's get beyond that and see what people really think and core values. So when we ask people pro-life or pro-choice, okay, let's move beyond that. Where do you think abortion ought to be legal? The vast majority of Americans think abortion should be legal in very small exceptions. And so exceptions not allowed by Roe v. Wade. So if we were to remove Roe v. Wade, the vast majority of Americans would go back to a very restrictive policy on abortion, number one. Many of these other issues, marriage, for example, 2/3 of Americans are in favor of traditional marriage, and only 1/3 really support same-sex marriage, if we could say that. So I think there's a lot for us to be hopeful about, and a lot core values of the American society are strong, and we can continue to build on that.
Carl, when you look out at the landscape today, politically and otherwise, with gay marriage being legalized in New York, there are pushes now in school systems, public school systems in California, in Minnesota, to advocate an entire curriculum that highlights same-sex unions, same-sex couples, same-sex historical figures. Your thoughts on how the Knights might approach this? Obviously, this isn't, I know it doesn't speak directly to what you all do every day, but increasingly this is moving into the daily lives of your membership and Catholics and Christians to a larger extent?
Well, I think one of the things that our opponents, if I may say, have been very adept at is narrowing the whole idea of this debate. It doesn't affect me because I'm never going to have that kind of a marriage.
Right.
That's not right, because what this is about is a profound shift in the culture, profound shift in the culture, and it isn't just about tolerating different alternatives of marriage. It's about really, as you pointed out, promoting a whole different kind of culture, and one that is moved away from the traditional values of marriage, the traditional relationship between people, and the right to life is included in this as well, because the constitutional basis for much of this comes from Roe v. Wade and other decisions like that. So this isn't a narrow debate. This is a debate about really a fundamental shift in the culture and where the culture is going. So first of all, we need to understand that. And then second of all, we need to understand why we are in favor of traditional marriage. And we're not in favor of it just because it's traditional.
Yeah.
We're in favor of it because it really is the truth about the relationship between men and women, the responsibility we have to children, and the role of marriage and family within society is extremely important.
Doesn't this now run also to a religious freedom argument and a freedom of speech? Because now you have, using this newly passed legislation, you now see it broadening to the point where Catholic orphanages are now closing down. There's a new bill just today. You have the Health and Human Services Secretary yesterday saying contraceptives and sterilization procedures have to be covered even under religious and Catholic health plans. There seems to be a very aggressive push, and I think people are just befuddled by all of this. They don't quite realize where this is coming from.
Well, we should remember, I think, that in the debate about national health care a year or so ago, everyone was assured that conscience would be respected, that institutions, religious-based institutions, they would be respected, there would be diversity, there would not be this heavy hand of government regulation and control.
Right.
And look at what we're getting.
Yeah.
And if you look at the provision in that new regulation that is a so-called conscience exemption, it is no good.
Yeah.
It does not, it is drawn so narrow that I don't believe there's any Catholic institution, healthcare institution, that can meet that qualification. So you ask why an administration has an exemption clause,
that doesn't exempt anyone.
That doesn't exempt anyone.
Yeah, no, it's really confusing and troubling. Let's move on to some more positive news. World Youth Day is coming up in August, this month. The Knights are really at the center of that, particularly for English-speaking pilgrims. Tell me what you all what you have underway and what plans you're making for Madrid.
Well, our participation has been growing, World Youth Day after World Youth Day. Last time in Sydney, Australia. This time, we're sponsoring with the Sisters of Life, the Love and Life Center. So you might look at the first encyclical of Benedict XVI, Deus Caritas Est, Love, and the great encyclical of John Paul II, Evangelium Vitae, Life. So we're looking at both. And opening up to all of the English-speaking pilgrims the great teaching of Benedict and John Paul II, and having a home for them, because one of the great things about World Youth Day is that these young adults see, one, they're very important to the church, and two, that they're not alone, that there are many, many similar, like-minded Catholics around the world.
There. Now, and you all have been making great strides to reach out to younger knights, squires. Tell us about that outreach. I know we saw in your talk a real outreach to recruit college knights. How's that going?
Well, it's going great. We have 260 councils on university and college campuses. We're very proud of them. Many of them are at Catholic universities like Notre Dame, Georgetown, Boston College. We're very proud of the councils we have at our military academy. So we see that we can be a help in helping to form the next generation of Catholic leaders, and especially lay leaders in the military, in the professions, in business, in medicine, all these areas. We need to help the next generation of Catholics live up to their responsibility to help shape the culture according to gospel values.
I know, I'm always impressed by the young guys. I saw them today in their uniforms. They were all knights coming down the escalators. And, you even see young, kids who are squires, which I didn't realize up until a year and a half ago when my son joined that squires even existed. And it's amazing how it focuses them at an early age on the imperatives of the church and what they can contribute. So it's a real positive thing, I think, not only for the Knights, but for their own development. Talk for a moment about the international outreach, which seems to be getting broader and broader for the Knights. This Haiti initiative, in the wake of that terrible earthquake, you all are providing prosthetic legs to everyone who's been injured
all the children.
All the children who were
Haiti being a poor country, it's kind of a triage. So the men get this kind of assistance first because they're the breadwinners,
right.
Then maybe the women, mothers, but the
There was
children,
nothing for the children.
There's not much left over for the children. So we decided we'll take care of the kids and go in there and do that. And we were very pleased to be working with Project MetaShare, which is an excellent organization, quality, and a big link with the U.S. military in terms of what they did immediately after the earthquake, but also now, so many of the experts that are helping these children, we're also working with American military coming back from Afghanistan or Iraq with the terrible injuries they've had there. So
I've been getting Facebook and email messages all day from Knights who are watching in. They've been watching this from all around the world and certainly in America. What is your message to them? What should they be doing both in their own council and as American citizens or citizens of their own country?
Well, I would say keep doing what you're doing because you're doing great work. Thousands of acts of charity. Look, we need to have a charity that evangelizes. That's what Benedict has talked about. And what does that charity mean? It means giving something of yourself, not just writing a check, but going out and helping somebody directly. That's the charity. That's the Knights of Columbus. It builds unity, it builds fraternity, and when we have those principles, then we can have an authentic patriotism where Knights of Columbus from Poland, Mexico, Canada, Philippines, United States, they're all proud citizens, they're all patriotic, and yet they're linked as brothers. And if we could build that kind of patriotism in the world, it'd be a lot better place.
Before I let you go, final question. How do you keep this schedule? Every time I turn around, I bump into Carl Anderson or I've been to a place where Carl Anderson just left. I mean, you're there with these relief projects. You're on various pontifical councils. I mean, you must have more frequent flyer miles to Rome than any man alive. How do you keep this schedule and this pace?
It is basically, if I could say it, the inspiration of so many Brother Knights at the local level, what they're doing. I mean, you see them, our Brother Knights in the military councils. I was just on an aircraft carrier, and you see the Knights serving there. Or in the local councils, like we have Knight volunteers in Haiti, in the inner cities. So many things going on that I just get fired up every time I'm with them. So it just keeps kind of...
It keeps you going, keeps your dynamo.
Yeah.
During our time here, we heard from Archbishop Timothy Dolan, the president of the Bishops' Conference. He addressed the Knights. Here's a little bit of his talk.
Well, you bet I'll say a few words, worthy Supreme Knight. Not so much as Archbishop of New York, as much as I'm honored in that position, but more as president of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. This gives me the providential opportunity to let you esteemed Brother Knights know how deeply we bishops, your pastors, appreciate your charism. You are Exhibit A when it comes to modeling the effective lay apostolate revived in the Church by the Second Vatican Council, a luminous example of the faithful, enlightened, generous man on the front lines of bringing the gospel of Jesus Christ as impeccably passed on by his church to home and family, business, community, culture, our beloved country, and our world. And so, Brother Knights, thank you. Thank you for putting Jesus and his church at the top of your priorities. Thank you for your outstanding loyalty to our Holy Father, to your bishops, and to our beloved priests. Thank you for defending the rights of the church when she's viciously attacked, and for helping people understand her life-giving, timeless, liberating message, the better. In a particular way, we bishops of the United States of America are grateful for your close alliance with us in the conference on certain core noble causes. Thank you for your ardent promotion of the premier civil rights issue of this day, the right to life of the baby in the womb. And thank you for your rallying of vocations to the priesthood and consecrated religious life. And thank you, finally, for your efforts on two urgent causes that are now right before us, causes eloquently referred to by our worthy Supreme Knight in his State of the Art address. Number one, the defense of marriage is that God-sanctioned union of one man, one woman in lifelong faithful love, leading, please God, to new life and children. The encouragement of Catholic men in their vocation as husbands and fathers has been part of the Knight's charism since the Venerable Father Michael McGivney, and we need you now more than ever in what is becoming a national attack on marriage and family. And stay with us, please, number two, in your vigilance on yet another project that has been close to the hearts of the Knights for a century, the defense of religious freedom in a culture that wants to relegate it to the sacristy and turn it into a hobby, rather than see it as a robust partner in the common good with its God-given, constitutionally guaranteed freedom vigorously protected by our government. To those who think that the Catholic Church in the United States is in retreat, on the run, or down in the dumps, we bishops say before you, let them come to a Knights of Columbus convention. Thank you. Faith and fraternalism, God and country, Christ and his church. We, your bishops, love you, Knights, very much. We need you more than ever. We cherish your collaboration, and we thank you. Viva il Cristo Rey.
I am very pleased to be joined by the Archbishop of New York and the President of the Bishops' Conference, His Excellency Timothy Dolan.
Raymond, always a joy to be with you. Thank you for the invite.
The joy is ours. Look, I want to start with some of the difficulties we're seeing on the national scene. I know, here you come to me, and what do? Bring difficulties to you, just what you need.
Trying to get away.
I know, but I keep dragging you back. First of all, this budget battle we saw on Capitol Hill. They raised the debt ceiling, but the $1.5 trillion in additional cuts, they're deferring to the fall. There's a special panel that's been appointed, and if they can't agree on those cuts, across the board, arbitrary cuts will be made. Are you comfortable with that? Are the bishops comfortable with that? I know there was a letter last week that was sort of asking the Congress to look closely at the moral consideration.
Yeah, budgets are moral documents. There's no doubt about that. Look, I think it's good for us bishops to admit we are not political tacticians when it comes to economics. We speak principles. We're supposed to talk about moral precepts. As an American, I'm still a little uncomfortable. One of the things I think we bishops might do a better job about, we've been pretty good, and I'm proud of the bishops for constantly asserting that the rights of the poor and disadvantaged always have to be protected. That's a good thing. That's a constant of Catholic teaching since the time of our Blessed Lord. What I don't think we bishops have been particularly good at is also insisting upon the fact that fiscal responsibility and things like a balanced budget are also a moral imperative. A point can be made that nobody suffers more than the poor when we have a runaway economic house in disorder. And I have heard many people say one of the best things we can do for the poor is to balance a budget, get our financial house in order, get more jobs, return more money to the people. So that's something we bishops need to speak more forcefully about at all. Now, somewhere between the two, constantly, always, unfailingly protecting the rights of the poor, the marginalized, the disadvantaged, with also protecting fiscal responsibility, the moral imperative of a balanced budget, that's a tough thing. And actually, this is one time where bishops can back away and say, we don't know how you do it, and we trust you to do it, and we're praying for you to do it.
But here's the principle.
Our job are the two principles. Somebody, Raymond, I thought, kind of summed it up well when they said this is an inbuilt tension between the two pillars of Catholic social justice, the principle of subsidiarity which says always trust people below the federal government to do things better. And the principle of solidarity, so beautifully articulated by our late Holy Father, that we can never forget the needs of those who are suffering. So somewhere between those two, as St. Thomas Aquinas said, in medio stat virtus, in the middle stands virtue. That's where it's at. More and more, I'm glad that we've got very prominent, articulate Catholic politicians that are trying to bring those values to the marketplace.
No, you raised the subsidiarity point in your letter to Paul Ryan. I know there was an exchange of letters there.
Actually, Paul wrote me first,
Right.
Congressman Ryan. I knew him and respected him immensely from Wisconsin.
Oh, that's
we
right.
became good friends. I tell you this, Raymond, one time, I wasn't Archbishop of Milwaukee that long when I was invited to Carthage College, which is a Lutheran college in Kenosha. They were kind enough to give me an honorary degree, and who's speaking but this young congressman whom I have never met, Congressman Paul Ryan. He gave, I didn't even know if he was Catholic or not, I figured with his name he was. He gave a humdinger. I mean, in an 8-minute talk, he quoted Thomas Aquinas, John Paul II, Joseph Ratzinger. I said, I like this guy, and I got to know him well. So he wrote me, Raymond, in a very, very courteous civil letter. He said, Archbishop, we've heard from the conference and all, and we respect that very much. And please know that as chairman of the Budget Committee, I do want to protect the needs for the poor. And count on me to do that. And thanks for your input, and I'm open to any counsel. But he said, I do bristle a little bit when the implication is given that just because I want to balance the budget, just because I want to cut some spending, and just because I sometimes ask a question as to whether big federal programs are the best way to help the poor, people immediately presume I'm anti-poor and opposed to the principles of Catholic justice. He said, I think a case can be made that these questions have a part in the conversation that must take place among committed Catholics. And I thought, you know, Congressman Ryan, you got a point there. And so I wrote him back, I hope an equally civil letter saying, Paul, not bad. Without ever compromising on the priority that we give to the needs of the poor, I think you've got a point, that fiscal responsibility and financial prudence, sound stewardship, there's also moral imperative.
Well, because if the American economy begins to falter precipitously, and we
Guess
may
who
be
suffers?
right on the edge,
Guess
the
who
poor are the
suffers?
first to suffer.
Guess who suffers, Raymond? And not only the poor in this country, but the poor of the world.
Right.
Because we're good for them. It's interesting now. Studies by economists are showing that, as a matter of fact, the Catholic Church was right on target. For instance, they've shown the wisdom of John Paul II in Centesimus Annus, who says, you know, sometimes a thriving free market economy can be the best thing for the poor, because there's nothing better for the poor than to have a safe, secure job of dignity. And also, did you see this, Raymond? Statistics have just come out that one of the best things for a country's economy is a high birth rate and a welcome given to immigrants. What are the countries today that are experiencing financial vitality? India and China, where there's a big birth rate. Now we've all, now, you know, it's so often a part of the Western enlightened proposition that, if we cut our birth rates because they're a drain on a sound
taking
economy,
resources
and
away.
if we welcome these immigrants in, that's going to take our jobs away. Boy, now economic scholars who might not even know anything about the teaching of the church are saying that ain't quite true. A high birth rate and a welcome to immigrants happens to be good for an economy. Every once in a while we get a little nod saying you're right on target.
You see, it's all coming together. The natural law never fails you.
You got it.
Let's talk for a moment about a battle I know you were in the middle of and you were deeply disappointed by. This redefinition of marriage that took place in your own state of New York. Where do you go from here? Very sad, very sobering. What are we going to do? One thing is we want to help other states because they're going to have the battle too. It's not about to stop in New York. And so we've got some insights that I've already begun to share with my brother bishops. Number two, Raymond, we have got to hammer home, as Carl Anderson so eloquently stated today, that this wasn't done right. Not only are we in the believing community upset with the bill, we're also upset about the way that it was done. This was hardly democracy in action. And if you folks who claim to be progressive and acting on behalf of the people, if you were so convinced that this was the will of the people, why didn't we do a referendum? And why did you have to literally lock the doors for the last 3 days and not face any public?
because you knew this really wasn't going to go over, right? So that's the second thing we got to say. And I don't think, I know it's going to be a long battle, but at least we got to stand for principle to say there's a real wisdom to a referendum here. And number three, Ray, where we've really got to be hyped up is the protection of religious liberty. We were told, you know, Raymond, when we were fighting hard against this, and we said the next step will be we're going to be sued if we don't do marriages, we're going to be harassed if we don't do receptions, we're going to be penalized if we don't allow adoption, we're going to be booed if we don't hire these people. They said, you're paranoid, you're Chicken Littles, that's not going to happen. It's already happening. We're talking about 3 weeks afterwards, and it's happening. Now, so the guarantees, the guarantee to religious liberty wasn't even given in the bill. We were told that it would be. Don't worry, you don't have to worry. All your rights are going to be protected.
What did you all think was going to happen? You all have lobbyists at the legislature. What were you being told? Were you told that you had the votes?
Here's what as we look back, and look, we bishops. I loved Archbishop Chaput this morning in his homily. He said, "We bishops got to be humble, and we got to say, did we do something wrong? Could we have done something better?" So we bishops have done a good examination of conscience and said, what did we do something wrong? What we are convinced, and we're not alone, we've heard other religious believers and even people of no faith at all who were allies in this noble cause, we fell for the assurances of people that we thought were political allies, that this wasn't going to go anywhere. Now, we thought there was some credibility to that because, as a matter of fact, the last two times, they were right.
They were right.
So we had political allies say, bishops, keep your ammo dry. You don't have to pull out the stops. Speak on principle. Speak up against this bill, but don't really worry because it's not going to go anywhere. We were told that, Raymond, up to 6 days before the bill passed. And so we thought, you know, it's a shame. I hate to say this because we Catholics also believe politics is a very noble vocation. It sort of taught us it's not all that good to trust politicians sometimes. And I think some of us bishops think we were being deceived. Now, that could, you know, shame on us for believing them. And what we don't know for sure, Raymond, I want to give some leeway here. Were our allies, were they truthful when they told us this isn't going anywhere? In other words, were they unaware of the governor's what's now been revealed as a very well-oiled, high-financed program of manipulation? Were they caught by surprise? Did they actually believe the wisdom they were telling us, or were they being a little bit edgy in saying, let's keep the bishops quiet by assuring them this isn't going anywhere? That I don't know.
Let's talk for a moment about something you wrote in the aftermath of this same-sex marriage law passing in New York. You wrote that this would lead to promiscuity and it would harm our kids. How so?
Well, see, here's the other thing, too. A lot of times in this battle, people were saying to us bishops, why are you so hung up on this? And, you know, I would respond, we've been hung up on marriage for a long time, and we have no apologies to make for that. We Catholics, people my age and older, can remember that we were worried about free divorce, the divorce culture. And we said, this is going to hurt. We're just not against this because we're Catholics. We're against this because this is going to harm the common good. And now, of course, scholars all over the place are saying, you know what, divorce wasn't all that good for us. When there was premarital sex, we said, oh, be careful. When there was the whole promiscuity of the 60s and 70s that glorified adultery and lack of fidelity, we said, that can't be. The contraceptive culture. We said, be careful. If you put a cleavage between procreation and sexual love, you're going to be in big trouble because that's not quite the way the Creator. So all along we've been saying, look, Holy Mother Church is wise. She's been in this enterprise for a long time. She's heir to the whole Jewish wisdom. And if you tamper with marriage and if you tamper with God's gift of sexuality, society, culture, and our kids are going to suffer. And now that's being borne out. You still got the voices, which defies reason, saying, no, the problem is that there's too many restrictions, that we don't have the freedom and the liberty of the promiscuity that we need. And I keep shrugging and saying, how much more freer can it get, and are we better off? Interesting enough, I don't know if you saw our friend Professor Robert George from Princeton. He had that excellent interview in National Review. He cited two books that said, from relatively liberal authors and scholars who said, you know who suffers most from divorce? living together before marriage, promiscuity, dilution of marriage. Women and children, especially the poor, they suffer because of this. And solid traditional marriage and the protection of family is one of the greatest acts in defense of poor women and children that we got.
You talked a moment ago about religious liberty and how that's a concern now. When we look at California, and we look at Minnesota, we see school districts now being targeted for not teaching gender-neutral courses and same-sex heroes, beliefs, and teaching it on a par with male-female unions.
We've got.
Is it coming to New York, or do you fear it's coming to your school district?
I'm afraid the tractors have arrived. We've had committed Catholic clerks who have simply, not meaning to be a cause celeb, but have simply quietly said, you know, can we back away? We can't do gay marriages, so-called gay marriages. Could you give them to somebody else? We're unable to do them just out of conscience. They're fired, right? They're fired. They're gone. So all this highfalutin talk about guarantees of religious freedom, this is something we've learned, I think, about those people who are opposed to us. They would like us to believe that all they want to be is to be left alone, be themselves. They want kind of a morally neutral playing field here. No, I'm afraid they want to take over, and they want to eliminate all opposition. See, this is what I fear. Carl Anderson was eloquent today when he said, in this battle, we Catholics are as American as you can get, in that we have to reclaim the American proposition that religious freedom, like other freedoms, do not come at the whim of the government, but are implanted in us by our Creator. And so we had political leaders who said, "Don't worry, we'll make sure we'll give you these freedoms." And we bishops said, "You know, pardon me, that's no favor. Don't think you're throwing us a bone. You have a constitutional duty to protect religious freedom. We're calling you to do this. We're not begging here for some favor." Because that's not the American way. I got tons of trouble in New York, Raymond, in one of my blog sites where I was attacking the legislation. And I said, this kind of redefinition of something, of a God-given right, this might go over in China or North Korea. Because there they know the government can decide where you live, where you work, how many kids you get, who's married, who's not, who dies, who lives. That might go down well there. It doesn't go down well in the United States of America, because we don't believe that. We believe that government exists to protect our rights, not to bestow them or take them away. This is the battle we got.
I happened to be in New York about 3 weeks ago, and sitting next to me was a priest and in his family at dinner. The waiter comes over and said, "I'm getting another waiter to serve you because you and your church are homophobic." What would you say in response to that?
I'd say, and you are anti-Catholic. I said, I tell you what, don't you judge all of us. Now, look, let's be honest. Were there some embarrassing, unfortunate homophobic elements to this battle? I'm afraid there were. But that's true in political discourse. And we bishops went the extra mile to dissociate ourselves from that and to try our best to say, this is not an homosexual crusade here. We've been traditionally against anything that would diminish or dilute the nature of marriage. But very interesting, Raymond, and the example you just gave is only another exhibit, another audiovisual aid in my point here. We're caricatured as the bigots, the bullies, the meanies, the people wanting to take away rights. If this battle showed anything, it's that the other side was lobbing the grenades. I think the civility, the courtesy, the rational arguments were on the side of those defending traditional marriage. The other side was filled with innuendo, ad hominem. I try to show you some of the letters that I got, but you'd lose your family rating. I tell you, because they were not.
I wouldn't want to read them. I wouldn't want to read them. I'll leave those to you. What do you say? And we got a lot of emails and calls when this story first broke. We had Bishop DiMarzio on the show the following week. What do you do with the politicians, Catholic politicians?
It's a tough
Archbishop,
one. That's a tough one.
Who are there in the pews? They use their Catholic credentials at election time, and yet.
Bishop DiMarzio was superb on this. He said, you know, you don't have the bonus without the onus. We're tired of you all wanting to show up at the chicken dinners and the parades and the processions and be in the front pews at midnight mass. They're flaunting the fact that you're a Catholic. That's the bonus. And then not really letting your light shine before the world when it comes to tough political judgments. I think he had a point, Raymond. How do you reconcile that, which I think is a very understandable, laudable posture, with also the posture that the church has constantly got to be conciliatory and welcoming? That's a tough decision that we bishops need a lot of prudence on. And I don't exactly know if I have the answer to that. I tell you one thing we got to take very seriously is we need a renewed catechesis on this whole element of conscience. Conscience. I am nauseated by the number of politicians who will wrap themselves in the cloak of St. Thomas More, claiming that they're only following conscience. As I said to one, you know, Bernie Madoff probably followed his conscience. Paul Pot followed his conscience. Following conscience,
if it's deformed,
is not the best thing in the world. Everybody thinks they're following conscience. We are called to follow a properly formed conscience. Thomas More lost his life, not that he followed his gut, not that he followed popular political whim. He followed a conscience that was formed by God's law as faithfully handed on by the church. That's why he lost his head, okay?
Right.
That's what we got to reclaim. We need a renewed catechesis in conscience. I do sometimes worry, Raymond, that we need not limit this just to the politicians. I mean, I think we need to speak to. We got a problem, and we bishops, you can see these glasses aren't rose-colored, okay?
I noticed
we got
that.
a lot of our own people that don't agree with us.
Yep.
We got a lot of. I had a Sunday before, I think, the vote, or maybe 2 Sundays before, where I spoke about it at the cathedral. I put out a word that I was going to do that. And afterwards, the press said, you know, we were in the front before Mass on the steps of St. Patrick, and we asked a number of Catholic people going in, the Archbishop Dole, you know, is going to preach on the defense of marriage. And a good number of them said, well, he doesn't have any right to do that. Why drag politics into Mass? And I said to them, this shows you how far we've gone. Not only do some people think we have no right to bring our values to the public square, they don't even think we have the right to do it inside our own church.
Yeah.
So we've got a catechetical challenge in front of us. Because a good number, some of our people aren't with us. I think deep down, most of our people are.
Now,
Carl quoted those excellent stats today on the pro-life issue and pro-defense of marriage. Our people are solidly with us. But we've got a good chunk of those who aren't.
Now there's this other front. The Health and Human Services Secretary saying as part of the new health plan, new health plans, including Catholic ones and religious ones, will have to cover contraceptive services approved by the government and sterilization surgeries approved by the government.
Do you have any good news, Raymond?
Look, I got to bring the heavy stuff to you. You're the man. You're the man with the answer.
This is very sobering. This is very dangerous. And the only good thing about it is that it's the biggest alarm clock that we could want. So you know that what people like Carl Anderson were saying today, you know what things like we bishops in New York were trying to say. Our people can no longer say, you're chicken littles, the sky isn't falling. I'm afraid when it comes to religious freedom, the sky might be falling. When you've got now government bureaucrats saying, we don't care about your conscience, you have to do this, that's scary.
But aren't you worried at this moment when the church, and you personally, have been demonized, coming off of this last battle, and with the sex abuse stuff still coming in, that culturally, the church has been pigeonholed now as this narrow, bigoted organization, and you don't have the political or cultural maneuvering room to go and fight this battle. They're coming now for your religious liberty on every front, in your schools, in your healthcare institutions, everywhere. What do you do?
I see, sir, that you are a prophet. You're right on target, I'm afraid. And we are those who are against us, and their name is Legion, want to caricature us as these antiquarian, medieval, oppressive, authoritarian, patriarchal people. And we can't, and you better beware of them because they're opposed to everything that enlightened American progress stands for. That's a big perceptive problem that we got. You know what we need to do, Raymond? We need to say, as I said to somebody, you know, when I said, you want to take a little trip down memory lane? About 70 years ago, the American government told some of our Catholic hospitals, you can't serve African Americans. We're sorry, they are not welcome in your hospitals. And we had brave religious women, brave priests and bishops, and brave committed Catholic physicians and nurses stand up and said, mind your own business. Our faith tells us we're in this whole healthcare apostolate because of our faith, and we could care less what some government bureaucrat tells us. We're going to serve every man and woman, and it doesn't, their skin color doesn't amount to a hill of beans. That was a great era in American Catholic history, right? And even the New York Times would put editorials out in favor of that. How about another? If you talk to any of the bishops of Alabama, you know what they got on their hand? They're suing their governor.
Just talk
because
to
the
Bishop
governor,
Baker.
Bishop Baker, the governor said, oh, by the way, you can't help illegal immigrants. If they come in for food, you got to turn their name
You're harboring them and you're a criminal.
Yeah, and Bishop Baker said, how dare you? It's none of your business. To help the stranger and the poor is to the heart of our religion, and our government has no right to violate our conscience. Now, those are causes that would appeal to those who wouldn't be with us when it comes to the... so what we got to do is bring it all together and say, do you or do you not respect our conscience? On a whole array of issues. I think that's what we got. That should be part of our strategy.
Final question before I let you go. We lost a friend, certainly a personal friend and a friend of yours, Archbishop Sambi. Your thoughts on him and his passing so suddenly?
You know who he reminded me of? Blessed John the 23rd.
He did.
He was
right.
Now I hope you will understand how I use this word, because when a Catholic uses this word, it's a high compliment. He was a peasant in the best sense of the word, as John Paul II was, meaning a man whose roots were in the earth, who loved people, who grew up in a very earthy is a good synonym there. And John the 23rd was that way. So Pietro Sambi was a father, he was a friend, he was a teacher, he was a pastor, and he had an earthiness about him, didn't he?
And a zeal.
Like Jesus did. You know, he could. I once. Here's a good example. I roared because when he first came and I was talking to him, I said, "Well, Eccellenza," I said, "Boy, in this country, you're going to have a lot of bishops to appoint or to recommend to the Holy Father for appointment." I said, "I know you just came from Israel, from the Holy Land. There were a lot of problems there, but you didn't have many bishops to appoint." He said, "No, we had few," but he said, "You remember, the smaller the lake, the bigger the storm." Now that kind of, in other words, we may not have had many, maybe 2 or 3, but were they ever stormy? So that was an example of the kind of earthiness that he had.
He was a special man. Before we go, I want to share with you an interview I did during our time here in Denver with Chris Lewis. He's president of the American Wheelchair Mission. It's a group that partners with the Knights of Columbus to do important work. And I also asked him about the inspiration for this mission. Take a look. Now, where did this idea come from? This was your brainchild.
Well, the American Wheelchair Mission is my brainchild, but I actually started delivering wheelchairs about 11 years ago. A philanthropist just saw that there was a need over in Eastern Europe and decided he wanted to start something, but he didn't know how to do it, so he called me and asked me if I would help him do it. And I had met him through the Muscular Dystrophy Association, and I got hooked on it. And
of course, your father, Jerry Lewis, was and is the centerpiece of MDA's great work, and of course anybody who's ever, unless you've been living under a rock, every Labor Day, it's a fixture certainly in our home. What influence did he have on you? I mean, I imagine you grew up.
Well, of course. My dad helped start MDA back in the early 1950s with Dean Martin, and I've worked on every MDA telethon since I was 14. So I went to school for what I'm doing now without ever knowing it, and that's just how it came about.
What involvement do the Knights of Columbus have, and how do you all interface?
Well, the wonderful thing about it is that we are able to deliver brand new wheelchairs that would sell for over $500 in a medical supply store with every $150 donation, because we buy them directly from the manufacturer and we ship them by large 280 wheelchair containers. So the Knights put together what are called Wheelchair Sunday parish drives and do drives within their churches, raise money from the parishioners, help sponsor the wheelchairs, and then we work with Knights councils on the ground in the Philippines or Mexico, or bring them with us to Vietnam or to Poland and help deliver the wheelchairs. So it's kind of an international service project, but we like to think of it as being tools in the hands of God, doing His work on earth.
Well,
that's what keeps us going.
There's certainly need out there, and I think people don't fully appreciate it. But in developing countries, in countries that have faced major catastrophes like Haiti and other places, I imagine the need is intense, and they simply don't have the means.
Over 100 million people in the world need a wheelchair and can't afford one. In places like Angola, it's the most disabled country in the world, with over 20% of the population disabled due to landmines, unexploded ordnance, civil war. And then you talk about Haiti, after the earthquake, we went down there, the Supreme Knight came down there with us, and we delivered several thousand wheelchairs, and we're just scratching the surface.
How do you decide where to go, given the need?
Well, we work with non-governmental organizations all over the world. It's really sponsor-driven. If a church from a certain part of Southern California is mostly a Vietnamese community, they may want to go to Vietnam. Same thing with the Filipino communities. I just got back 12 days ago from Naga City in the Philippines, delivering just that kind of container that was raised at a parish drive.
So you're always looking for people to support and help your efforts?
Of course.
And how do they get in touch with you?
Well, we have a great website. It's amwheelchair.org. And we have lots of videos on there that shows the Knights of Columbus working all over the world delivering wheelchairs, and tells a story about how we do what we do, and how we change people's lives.
They do great work. It was a pleasure bringing you the Knights of Columbus Supreme Convention once again this year, and we'll see you next year in Anaheim, California. Now, during the week, I brought along my own little squire. You know, the Knights have begun an outreach to young Catholics, and young men like Alexander, my little guy here, is a squire, right?
Yep.
Not only a squire, a deputy chief squire. Now, where did you get this this very officious-looking Lord High Chancellor medallion collection?
Well, a gentleman from Texas named Greg Witcher gave this to me at the Pin Exchange last night.
Tell people what that is real fast.
This is where knights come from all over the country and world with bags full of pins that they designed, and they trade with each other and try to get all the pins.
But how did you get all these pins? You didn't have any pins to
I
begin with.
didn't, but Mr. Witcher gave me all these pins, and then people gave more pins to me, and I realized, oh, I have duplicates, so I traded those for more, and this is how I wound up with this.
I need to make you my stock manager, then we'd be in good stead. So did you have fun this week?
I did. It was great. The Knights of Columbus are a fantastic organization.
Okay, Alex, thanks for being along for the ride. Until next time, you can find updates and the occasional commentary by following me on Twitter or on Facebook. You can always go to my website, RaymondArroyo.com, for all that information. And if you want a very funny summer read of The I Zing, America's cultural decline from muffin tops to body shots, is still on the bestseller list, and you can get your copy now. Until next week, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and hardworking crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye now from Denver.